Ladies and gentlemen, we love that you are joining us here, and we hope that you could do us a favor. If you are liking our episodes, please share them. Tell us that you like them. Leave us a review, and we will be eternally grateful. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Wizard and the Priestess. I am your host, Nuala, along with my host, Matt. He just did a nice countdown for me, but we are sorted. Today, Matthew, can you give us a little, maybe a little Dreamtime joke?
You could put it in the dream time if you want. But I was thinking, isn't it funny how plastic surgery used to be a bit of a taboo subject? And now you just simply mention Botox and no one raises an eyebrow.
Oh, wow. That was good. Can't believe you just pull them out.
Dreaming.
It's pretty shocking to me. Anyway, well, welcome on board, everyone. If you are one of those souls that currently cannot raise an eyebrow, kudos to you. For the rest of us, they are rearing and ready to go. Today we have been kind of savoring this topic for a little while, and it's sort of come to our minds again and again. But in recent times, as I guess you all know by now, that I've been personally working through quite a few things, and I've been tapping into my dreams to help me understand what is currently coming, what is at the surface, what is ready to be processed, what is being moved through. And I want to throw that to you, Matt. What is a dream?
What is a dream? Well, you could say dreaming is an activity of communication through the veil of the unconscious mind and the conscious mind. And really the nature of dreaming is it's really wholly independent on the situation regarding someone's energy, blockages, activations, or I was going to say crystallization, that's kind of like a raw term. Crystallization is you acting out something. So you've crystallized the thought by doing something about it. So someone who's blocked at, say, 2 or 3 lower energy centers or chakras, the dream will show a value in kind of polarization and where they're at with that. And if someone who is more activated from the heart center or above, then this can be somewhat of a virgin birth, if you will, like a death to their sort of animal self and reborn into a more spiritually congruent existence. But there's many, I guess, definitions of a dream, but there's
how does it take place? What is the mechanics of a dream?
The mechanics really, so one must ideally be consciously unconscious. So dreaming, you have to be asleep. You have to go into certain REM cycles to be asleep. When we are in a sleep state, now there's no definitive anatomy or mechanics, or however you said it, of the dream, but there are plenty of theories that sort of fit in with several other models as well. When our physical body is still and we lose consciousness, our consciousness then goes into the etheric body, goes into the astral body, goes into the mental body, and then it goes into the collective. So we would dream typically on the astral plane. The astral plane is where we have etheric material which actually moves faster than the speed of light. But the astral body is also a conglomeration of our mind, body, spirit, totality, beingness. So when we're dream, we're getting a report card of the psyche as it is. Is there a TCM, mechanical or anatomy basis?
Yeah, there is. Before we jump there, I just wanted to pull in a little bit more from what you just shared. So, or just clear it, like make it really succinct. The dream itself is is a a state. So, what's the what's the state of the brain in that moment? Like, what's the wave state? Like, what
I
do we need to
think,
be in REM cycle? But what's the brain activity?
well, the brain activity, some in some people, you actually produce DMT from the pineal gland. So you get that out of body worldly experience. Now, trying to think of the sleep cycle that it's called specifically. Typically, we go from REM one, two, three, four, then three, then two, and we kind of cycle between the two. Now, depending on the individual, so there's certain centers that never really shut down, like the breathing, the primary respiratory mechanism, parts of the thalamus, essentially all the parts of our body that keep us alive. They don't stop for obvious reasons, but the the parts of the brain like the cerebellum, they will quieten down. That's involved in balance and coordination. So we don't need balance and coordination while we're sleeping, physically anyway. So more so the brain centers and the brain stem are more active during sleep than the rest of the brain. Some people with a lot of
Yeah.
stress will have an active prefrontal cortex and a lot of activity in what's called the anterior cingulate gyrus, and sometimes the insular cortex, which is like our balance point of homeostasis. So if someone's had a hard day at work and they need to physically repair, then that insular cortex will have a lot more activity in it compared to someone who doesn't.
Yeah, for sure. And that correlates quite, like, how am I going to bring this together? But it correlates quite a lot to once we get to that deeper state, that like really slowed down state, we get into that theta wave state. And that is then going to allow us to connect to that astral field, the astral plane, bring in that unconsciousness into our mind, right?
Conscious mind, yeah.
Conscious mind. And then that conscious mind is what gives us the pictures and
Well,
the feelings.
we get drip fed from these higher frequencies, which our unconscious is tapped into. We get them drip fed. So it's essentially, think of frequencies moving so fast that we can't see them with our physical eyes. But when they're slowed down enough, like matter, for example, that's frequency slowed down enough for us to interact with it.
Yeah.
That's in the physical plane. When we're dreaming, we get these drip feeds, and that's a sum totality, but they're drip fed into us, our conscious mind, in symbols and metaphors so that we can understand, because the dreamer is always dreaming about the dreamer. And every time I say that, people ask me to repeat it, so I'll repeat it again. The dreamer is always dreaming about the dreamer.
Yeah, so it's like all those symbols that we see or experience within a dream are actually just correlated to within ourselves.
Yep.
Yeah, it's really interesting as I've dived into more from the influence of Morgana, who we've had on our show. She's obviously an alchemist herself and dives into this like in a real deep Jungian analytical way. And she kind of guided me to start processing my dreams through writing them down. And what I found was, as I wrote them down, they made no sense to me as from a conscious standpoint. But what they did do when I started to unravel the layers of it from from a kind of theoretical standpoint and pulling out the themes within that, I could really dive a little bit deeper. And I think it's hard when you're, as a clinician myself, I find it difficult it's easy to look at someone else and be able to theorize and find the thematics and understand the symbols because I'm outside and I'm just getting a much clearer picture because I don't have all the other side talk that's going in. But as a person, when you do it yourself, you actually are able to find even more clarity within that once you get given the symbols back to you, because it makes a lot more, you can kind of weave that web of information back together. And it's sort of become such an assistant for me. This dream analysis has been such an assistant to acceptance and to letting go of the things that I've been working through in my dream. And when you just shared the idea that we kind of go into the astral plane in a sense and bring that back in with us, and it slows everything down to a point where we can actually grasp it. Or for example, the way I see it in my mind is this idea of the droplets of energy actually are stopped for a moment, and we actually see clearly within that droplet what the information it is providing. And that's it's quite interesting I'll bring the TCM in now. From a TCM perspective, the way we look at the dream itself is the mental emotional processing. So it correlates quite nicely in some ways to how like a Jungian theory, like dream analyst would look at it, in that they are understanding what is now, what is where you're at. And so you don't dream something that isn't being processed. It's sort of like, feels really cool to think of it like the droplet that's currently vibrating around your being is slowed down enough in that theta wave state to be able to give you a really clear picture, clear in a non-earthly way. Because if you've done any of this and you've like thought about a dream and gone, what the fuck is that? Where and how did that? And then you kind of pull out the pieces, or like are able to be supported to pull out the pieces of how that actually correlates to what's going on. It in your particular experience of this life on the earthly plane, it makes more sense. And I remember sitting in one of my first ever Chinese medicine 101 classes with a doctor or professor, I think he's named professor now, James Flowers. And he was sharing for us that he just loved listening to dreams, which was quite interesting at that point, because he was like, I don't know much about it, but I love listening to it. It always gives me more of a story of what this person's experiencing. But then if you go into the text and you have a look at the Neijing and you understand it a little bit more, there is information in there that really gives you so much more of a holistic perspective on what a dream is telling you from a TCM perspective. And I guess it's kind of bringing the reminder, or reminding you listeners, that there is the spirit of the organ, and each organ digests different things, or this has a different spirit. So it is therefore working on different aspects at different times. So you have, we have the wood that's correlated to the liver, which is the Hun energy. Then you have the heart, which is the big Shen, so the big spirit of the self, which a lot of people that have dream disturbed sleep, so it actually is nightmarish or anything like that, most of the time on a very basic level we correlate it to the heart, because if it's dream disturbed it comes back to the heart, the big Shen, the Shen that is being housed within the soul itself. And then we kind of move into we have the spleen, which is correlated to the Yi, the lung, which is the Po, and the kidney, which is the Z. But each of those go a little bit deeper. So when you think of the Shen itself and correlating that to the heart, we think of the dreaming as in and of itself, but also the more vivid the dream, the more chaotic or restless or disturbing the dreams. If you feel the emotion to that, that disturbance actually gives us a bit of an indicator that there's the potential of heat, there's the potential of excess within, or deficiency. Could be a deficiency in the water that holds and houses, or it could be an excess in heat that's gotten rid of the water as well. Those two will probably hang together in this.
Would that
But then
correlate to someone with, say, arthritis or arthrosis?
It could be, but the initial aspect of that would be if you're going to catch it instantly, which is the idea of holistic health, that we see these symptoms straight away, we're probably likely to see someone with night sweats. So we're seeing that sort of symptom is going to correlate to a heart disturbance, especially if we're then connecting that to more chaotic or disturbing dreams themselves. And sometimes all it takes is one needle to, like, that actually could be going on for quite some time, but it usually just takes one, like, releasing the heart or reconnecting the heart, grounding down the heart a little bit, and maybe nourishing, but more likely than not, there's a little bit of an excess fire going on, and that creates that disturbance. Um, then there's lots of different ways. So then there could be more if your dream, so the hun itself, which is related to the liver and the wood, a lot of people say, okay, well, that's related to anger, which it is related to anger. And it could be related to more a real nightmarish, but a violent nightmare. So that could be in there as well, or a frustration, simple frustration and anger. But the thing that I find that it's got to come into consideration with this, we can see that, but also remembering that the liver is correlated to the imagination itself. The hun is responsible for giving us enough imagination to actually believe that the day goes on. So every morning when we wake up and the sun rises, that's when that sprout comes. That's the wood itself sprouting from the earth. And so if you can kind of configure that into a dream expression of, say, this anger or disharmony, that the sprout isn't fully sprouting, and yet so that would be very like direct correlation. But then you've got to remember that there's also the imagination at play. So if there's quite a vivid imagination in general that is disturbing, then we can correlate that more to a liver pattern. And that lives on whether that's in a dream or not, but it's kind of remembering that this spirit form correlates to the function form of the organ itself. It's
Yeah,
not
I mean, it's got
one.
to express itself, experience itself physically, right?
Yeah. And so that it keeps going. So it's sort of like everything is, the spleen would then correlate to the intellect. So it's that thinking, that digestion in the head, the full, like, so if we're worrisome about something that's life stuffs, we can kind of use that. We can use that as a tool to understand, okay, if someone's thinking all the time and then now they're going into their dream state and they're getting this spat out to them, maybe a recurring dream could be that it's recurring. It's kind of not quite accepted yet. The body hasn't quite churned it out and worked it through. And that's why when we come back out of our dream state, we can then understand something a little bit more deeply. So what is it that's actually happening that's reoccurring? Is it that something, is it that there is like you get to a point at the end of an exit and you don't get through it? You get to a point and that might not be the same point, but you almost get to a part of a dream and then you wake up.
Mm.
And it's like that kind of demonstration of your dream that is showing you that you get to a point and you can't quite get through it. So what is it in your actual life that you're getting to and you're not actually able to process? You're not processing it through. And that would be correlated more to that yi, which in a Chinese medicine perspective, it would be likely that we would see someone with a digestive disturbance. We would likely see someone with a pensive worry or a continuous worry. And that is how I would use the dream to then be like, okay, so this is what you dreamt about, but how can you use that information? And what I find with some dream stuff is that people have an idea of what their dream is telling them. And if I give them a piece that doesn't fully fit the picture of what they've decided it means, it's very hard to integrate into. So when I say all these about dream, I just want to preface to go gently and tread lightly, because sometimes the theme of which you want it to be may or may not be the truth. And that's okay. It could be, I'm on the outside, I'm just looking in. But it's a matter of dreams can really churn up things that you weren't hoping to find, but I don't believe that they find things that you're not already processing. And that is why there's such a correlation between the body and the mind. And what we see in clinic, we will see a physical body processing that exact thing that would be thematically connected or correlated to the mind.
Yeah, there'd be a psychological theme going on in life for that person for sure. And for me, I think dreams provide the most direct access to their unconscious material. And that with that bridge, it's a message from the unconscious. It's not from the ego. The ego has no fight against it because it's done in symbolism. So anything in a dream form can't be ego. However, when we wake up from that theta brainwave, the reticular activator system, which is the part of the brain that switches us on, that theta goes down, and the other, I'm brain farting on what they're called now. Is it beta? Is that the first one we go into?
As we're waking up.
Yeah.
Yeah, beta. Well, beta is sort of I'm pretty sure is the one that we're in most of the time.
Yeah, I get them mixed up. But as they come back online, as does our default settings come online. And that's why a lot of the dreams don't get remembered because they're sort of pushed to the side. But when our programming comes online, if we have a dream that we perceive to be scary, that gets interpreted by the program, which can trigger and bend our perception on what the dream is. It would be perceived as scary. But then your psyche is not going to show you anything that you're not, that's beyond you.
Yeah.
It's always going to show you, I guess, just where you're at and what's going on. And there will be a message in there.
Yeah, and this is another really cool way or to look at it, which I've been bending my mind towards a little bit more, but is to utilize the TCM clock. And it's very difficult from my perspective because the wakefulness state that you move through is the alpha waves, by the way. But the once you get to the beta state, it's very difficult to actually download anything that was in the theta wave state because it's not, or at least it's taken us, we're all in the physical. But the thing that I've been kind of touching on, but also being conscious of, so in our sleep state, so we ideally are asleep between 9 and 7-ish. So not necessarily till 7, but we're asleep between 9 and 7 on a general, or we're waking between that 5 to 7 time, as like the large intestine awakens and we let go of everything and we kind of move into activity. But what is in that clock time, so we have from 9 to 11, we're in the Sanjiao, which is that integration system, which is it's the transporting, it's the messenger system between the 3 levels. So we saw that it's known as the triple burner. It's like that connection of, we've spoken about it as heaven.
This is PM, isn't it?
This is PM. This is in the night. So this is like when we know between 9 and 11 is usually the time we're going to sleep. And so if there is a disturbance, we could correlate the disturbance of falling into a deepened sleep is a disturbance in the Sanjiao. So we can kind of, even before we're even in dreaming state, why can't we get landed could be correlative to the clock itself. And then also that would correlate again within another cycle would be the season itself. So what season is actually being uncovered in that moment as well? Where are you on that cycle? Where are you in the earthly plane? But yeah, we can kind of see this as the ideal state of transformation from active yang state into yin state. So is there something of that transition or transition in general that we're having issue with? And so most of the time as we fall into sleep and we come into dream state, we are moving at a kind of, it's more gentle and it should be more gentle. And it's kind of the initial processing. So it's like that processing, moving through the beta waves into the alpha wave state, falling towards the theta wave state. And so, yeah, we can kind of connect in that from between the 9 and 11. But then once we get between 11 and 3, we start to go into the wood, which brings in that hun, which is the imagination. And it's the
That's
wood.
gallbladder liver, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've got the 11 to 1 is your gallbladder, and then you've got your 1 to 3 is your liver. But that is our imagination. That is the height of our imagination, which feels really interesting in correlative terms to what we are moving to, what you shared about the astral plane, right? So wood is going to be, it's going to be partly or a lot to do with our imagination and how interesting is that's correlated to our nighttime sleeping when we are ideally asleep
Yeah.
between 11 and 3.
What would you say, if there is a difference for you, the difference between imagination and imaginal?
There probably wouldn't necessarily see, I wouldn't be able to decipher that, but I'm sure you could give us a good definition between the two.
Well, just what came up when you were talking, when we were talking about the psyche. The psyche is imaginal. Sorry, yeah, imaginal, not like imaginary. So
Oh, okay, I hear what you're saying.
in your imagination, you can think of the
Right.
sun and you're there, right? In the psyche, if it's imaginal, it's more real. Therefore, the sun is a part of you. So you are the sun. But I think it's the ego creates the imagination of it.
Mm-hmm.
And dreams can't be distorted or defended by the ego. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, you're bending my mind now because I've got to twist it a little bit further than I was. So I guess the thing for me is that I would say that most people, their deepest dream state is between 11 and 3, and that would be when they are getting their most, or it's just as they're waking up. But it would be almost, from my perspective, that would be when they're digesting their most kind of important aspect. It's sort of from this. If we're going to look at the clock,
Yeah,
we're going to look at the clock.
what time was the most important? Did you say?
Well, it's not necessarily the most important, but it's probably going to set the theme of the dream experience potentially of what's up and ready to be digested.
And that's
And that
between
would be,
11 and 1.
well, 11 and 3, because it would
Sorry,
be the
11 and 3.
wood.
Okay.
Yeah, whilst those two are different, your gallbladder is more like your people pleasing facet of like digesting those people pleasing, or it's trying to resolve. The gallbladder's function is of resolve. So it's like, if that is what it is doing in that time between the 11 and 1 o'clock, like I don't actually have, like I said, when you're in a dream state, it's very difficult to wake up and like bring yourself through all that brain activity and then get yourself back in. It's going to be, unless you are awoken at that point. And then it's very interesting if you are awoken, if you can capture your dream, because most of the time when you're awoken by a dream, there is an aspect of that is trying to move you out of, there's something maybe turning back on potentially. That we're moving out of that theta wave and we're moving into like quickly moving through alpha back to beta, to not, it's like maybe that's a safety mechanism potentially. Maybe that's when the ego, or what I would like to, rather than ego, but the security guard is trying to pull you away from what you were close to reaching, some form of Jungian term individuation and understanding and like crossing over that bridge, but then potentially something was turning back on. I wonder whether, like, from your perspective of that, would that be, like, I think of that in terms of when you get woken from a dream. Personally, I'm woken a lot from dreams, but that's, I don't know whether that is in combination with the collective energy of the children or child or whoever is in my bed and awakening me, or is it a collective energy that is, we're moving through that together.
Well, I used to have dreams of falling And just as you fall, that's when I used to wake up. And what I
Hmm.
found was I had this quite lucid dream one time, and I was kind of weirdly conscious enough in the dream to say, let's face this. And I consciously went through the fall and almost commentated through the fall. And since I did that, I started to fly in the dream.
Mm.
And I haven't had a dream about falling since.
Mm.
So waking up from the dream, I would say, is often fear related, but it's also potentially a protective mechanism by the ego, like it's the
Yeah.
whole survival thing.
Yeah.
So I would
Yeah.
say it depends on what you were dreaming about.
That would be, yeah. And I think that's where we can get really, I think it's really such a magic. We have so much magic at our fingertips. We can really dance with the power of the dream and the unconscious using the information that the dream provides us. And I think that that's something that so we can keep going from the TCM clock's perspective. So a lot of the time, women that I've worked with would wake between the 1 and 3 a.m. and they can't get back to sleep. And so most of the time I would correlate that to a form of potential blood disorder or a chi disorder. The chi's not flowing, it might be stagnated, there might not be enough, likely that there is too much is it's a stress state because the liver is out of whack. But then it's also the time where there's a lot of emotional processing. It's the toxin processing time between 1 and 3. So and I'm talking toxicity. When I say that, I'm talking toxicity of the emotional mind. So it's not necessarily, okay, we could look at it from what does the liver do and it digests toxins. But if we look at it from that emotional toxicity, like it might just be emotion in general. Like it should be in motion, but the chi is stuck. And therefore, that energy is awakening you because you're not quite ready to move through it, which is quite interesting on the process of personal growth and what you just shared of like, okay, I'm just going to let myself go here, or I'm going to let myself move through this experience. And I recently had a dream where I'd had this really, yeah, like sort of aspect from the past that came back through, and I was feeling really uncomfortable about it. And then all of a sudden I was on a pyramid, it was glass pyramid, and it was like all of these very particular thematic, symbolic experiences. And then I remember me and my partner together had to let go, and I remember being like, well, we're holding on the edge of this kind of thing and we had to let go. And I was like, well, we have to let go. And then I let go and he let go together. And then we were falling and we literally landed. And I was like, okay, just got to trust in the process. But like, it's been interesting that since I've opened up the can of worms of actually connecting to my dreams more, it feels as if there is more being processed and there is more at the ready to be moved through. And
And
so
what
I feel like you go.
I was just going to say, what also came to me when talking about waking up and the like energetic blockages. If there's an energetic blockage somewhere, there's going to be too much energy somewhere else. And so there's too much energy going through a circuit, you blow the fuse. So you waking up could be also diffusing the circuit breaking.
Mm. Which is never a bad thing, right? We've got to trust that also.
Yeah.
Well, like, I mean, you should trust that too, because if we want the circuit to break in a sense. You don't want, that's the whole reason you have circuit breakers, right? So you don't blow up.
I'm thinking blowing the fuse. You know what I mean?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so it broke. So it blew up.
Well, if there's too much energy in one spot, you blow the fuse. I didn't go
Yeah.
to electronic school, clearly, but that could be the waking up bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And is it because then quite like then we move into the 3 to 5 a.m., which is the lung, which we can correlate to the Po, which is all related to um yeah, it's like a peacefulness. It's like it's the big part of letting go. Like the whole aspect of Po is letting go of yeah, it's like big breath out. It's why people say between 3 and 5 a.m. there's this time that you can do breath work. You can like you've shared before, that's the point in time that someone was told that's the point you meet your maker, or that's the point that you should do deepest meditation work. But that, from a TCM perspective, correlates to that idea that is a point in time, whereas the big let go, the power of the let go, that comes within that period of time when the lung is being activated. However, if you are, if you're experiencing, like, it's sort of that moment in time where you have the possibility of integrating the soul with the body from a TCM perspective. And so, it's like you could find that there's points in a dream where you start to lose your breath, and that could correlate. I don't know, but it might correlate to this time of the day, or this time of the early morning. And then, just to finish that off, as you awaken, as the let go completely, we go deepest down before the earth, we start to rise with the sun, is that between that 5 to 7 a.m., which is when the large intestine is online. And that still is correlated to the metal, which is the deepest point of let go. But it's also the deepest point of let go, which is when the bowels start to move. So it's kind of that awakening. We ideally want to awaken before, but what can happen symptomatically is when the let go happens too quickly. So when you wake needing to do a bowel motion. So what the large intestine essentially is doing, it's preparing us to eliminate all the things that we were working through the night. It's preparing us for the awakening that we were meant to have, the dream being integrated. So just like the Sanjiao, the triple burner helped us land and transition from the yang state, active living state, to yin state, the large intestine starts to transition us and transport us into the active state again, into that yang, from the yin to the yang. And so it's sort of this time of, like, if we can allow ourselves the gentle waking, the movement from the theta wave state into the alpha, then to the beta. And through that alpha state, if we can capture in that moment what we worked through it and allow ourselves to process that, and we can actually use the metaphysical, or that unconscious knowledge that we've gained through our dreams, into our physical state when we go to the bathroom in the morning, and we release all of that toxicity. And the way that I speak of it from a not from a, like, the dream state, but from the physical state, is that your body's worked all night on digesting and cleaning and refining and, clearing out any debris that was left over from the day's work and the day's experience. And then it moves it all through. And then in the morning, we have this cleansing bowel motion, and we can support that with, say, warm water with lemon, a nice tea, tranquil spaces, softness, however that looks for you, softness in the storm if that's necessary. But whatever it is finding a place to land and then allowing that debris to be moved through. And that's what the large intestine is going to support you to do between the times of 5 and 7. So it's sort of like, it's from that sort of metaphysical state, of the unconscious state. We could say that through the night, we're able to connect into the, I don't know which one it was now, at least to some extent, the imagery that the wood has offered us to process through the night. And then we've used this process of lung and metal to actually fully let it go, to allow space to let it go. And then we waken and we fully release it and completely move into the let go state. If we can bring that into our day to day, and like that be the thing that we do, is we allow our dreams to offer us the gifts of digestion, of the, what's going on in the metaphysical for us, then we probably find that we'll physically be more well. We're less likely to have, to have all of the disharmony. And especially if we can then ground that information down with the logical brain, ground it down through those beta wave state, where we bring it in to the bring it from the unconscious.
Yeah, I think the ego mind's there to help us make sense of it, so we can piece it together. Okay. So are you, from a TCM view, the first half of the night, we'll call it, so from 11 till 3, the dream, if there's a dream symbolism, it's often to do with like a blockage.
I'm not going to be so like firm on that, but what I wrote down earlier when I was writing this, like preparing for today, what I said was that there is in Chinese medicine, it is very clear that dreams and dream states are not do not depict a serene mind. So what would depict a serene mind would be no dreams.
Yeah.
So that is the ultimate state where maybe we move into what would be the gamma waves, which is going to help us download the mystical, what you were talking about, the kind of, not elevated soul, but the awakened soul. So they are less likely to actually dream and process through the dream like we earthlings are.
You go into a state of no mind, essentially.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So Chinese medicine would suggest that actually dreaming in and of itself is not ideal because it means that the mind is constantly going. We're wearing ourselves thin. We're actually on some level, whilst the mind is active, we're pulling from the kidney, which is where the gray matter is formed from.
Okay.
So bringing that back to what you were sharing is that so that would be the serene state of an awakened being, would be that there is no dream. But whilst we're not there, and whilst it's unlikely we're going to be there in Earth, I mean, some of us, I'm happy to say that I might not get there. Hopefully, I assume I will get there by the end of this lifetime, where all of a sudden it would become serene state. But it is a demonstration that we've got work to do. And especially we just look around in the collective and we can see that there's work for all of us to do. So I want to bring that back now to say that whilst I'm not going to say it is definitely stagnation, or what did you call it? But like the main aspect of the night between 11 and 3, it doesn't mean that there's something, but I would say that it is potentially. If there is nothing going on in that time, then that's a good indicator that there is nothing to go on in that time because there is a complete, serene, blissful, awakened soul who's been able to integrate everything and everything is balanced. But when there's something out of balance, and then especially in our Western culture, that stress is kind of like, I don't know many people that aren't stressed, whether or not, my stress is different to your stress. And what my stress is, you might not perceive as stress, and the same vice versa. But in our Western world, that's quite, that I guess is going to be even more obvious and more seen in those between the 11 and 3 time. But it's almost, from my perspective, I'm just kind of pulling this all together. It's like this opportunity to process the unprocessed emotions. Instead of going and talk therapying it out, you can actually utilize your dream. And how we can do that, I'm sure you can give some steps too, but what I would say is prepare your sleep space. Really focus on dream hygiene or sleep hygiene, which would be that preparation for sleep, potentially going to sleep with a intention.
Yeah, Candice Pert talks about stating 3 times out loud before you go to sleep, I will remember my dreams. I will remember my dreams. I will remember my dreams. Especially if there's something you want to get from it. Like if you're healing from something, then, the way out of a certain painful position that we're holding on to consciously can be healed or worked on by a dream or a series of dreams. And we feel stuck between, what's that, hard rock? No.
Rock and a hard place.
That. And we feel incapable of deciding either way. Then a dream appears with, for some, really powerful symbol, and that will often just show the way and how to work with
something
that.
I wanted to add too was that so I've been touching on and learning about what's called Gemanesh Hakunde, and it is quite interesting because there is the idea and theory that you can actually create turmoil, or turmoil can be created through the dream. Like dreams are not real, if that makes sense. They are active frequency within the system. And like I had only looked into this because one morning I'd had this really big dream, and one morning I woke up and I had a sty in my right eye. And I was like shocked by what I'd experienced in the dream to then have this manifest in the morning. And then I quickly, well, not quickly, but then I was so interested by it. I was like, wow, this feels like it's correlative to the dream itself. And then once I found that um, correlation, it almost started to, yeah, it instantly started to dissipate, as if the conflict had been processed in the dream, because that's the idea of Gamana Kunda, is that you process it in the dream. Like the dream is the processing. And then after the processing, you actually get the symptom. So the symptom is the experience of the healing.
Yeah.
That is what the symptom is the healing. And so I woke up in the morning, and then within a few hours, I had this sty in my eye. And then within a few hours later, it was gone completely.
Was that from Blinky Coffee?
I hadn't done Blinky Coffee yet. So it was before Blinky Coffee even came into being.
Wow.
And so, yeah, it's quite interesting in that sense that how powerful and potent dreams are. And maybe that is the case because I've been like playing with dreams and connecting to them for the most part of the last 5 months, and like working through them with Morgana and Tina, and kind of digesting them and understanding them from, yeah, from their perspectives, and getting out that Jungian analysis of those dreams, and then allowing that to move through me, and then allowing myself to find peace, because it's almost like, okay, it's giving me a perspective that I hadn't looked at it, a lens to look at it through, which then gives me clarity and allows me to let go, which, yeah.
Which is essential to your individuation process.
Exactly. And feels very powerful and potent that the Chinese clock correlates to that by the hour. That, we're processing our emotional debris through the biggest part of our night. It makes it feel really, really important to be sleeping. And I just want to say, what I was getting at before was that we can prepare ourselves for our experience by, it could be, drinking a particular type of tea before bed to allow ourselves to really land. You could, ground yourself more by giving yourself the opportunity to have a foot soak with, Epsom salts or something to actually ground you down back into that flow state for your body to, really land into that. And I mean, you could look at it from a chemical position, in ensuring that there's enough magnesium in the system to help us fully land into those theta brain waves, even if you're woken through the night as a mother of children or whatever it might be. That we ritualize the sleep and dream hygiene before we come into bed, so that then in the morning when we wake through those alpha states, we can actually remember our dreams. And even if it's minute detail, writing that down and starting to create that dream journal that allows us to kind of piece that together, and then working with someone. I mean, I feel like it's not necessarily a main thing for you, but I'm sure that you'd be open to working with your clients on their dreams and
we get into it,
supporting them through understanding what.
But as you were talking about sleep hygiene, I find a real big thing with that is Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi has to be switched off. And even if you think the modem is, other side of the house, whatever, well, your next door neighbors won't be. I can guarantee you. And even the wires in the wall, the telegraph wires, all that kind of stuff adds up, and it builds up, and it vibrates the cells, and it actually doesn't allow you to get into the REM sleep to dream.
So without scaring everyone, because everyone's got Wi-Fi on around you, unless you're living in the bush like me. But even then, like the Wi-Fi could be penetrating because it's trying to bounce off whatever it can to get through to the other portal. But I feel like a really beautiful thing that you can just do is just to cover yourself in light. remembering that you are a powerful frequency as well, and you can change that quite simply by zipping yourself up or wrapping yourself over in light and demanding that that is more potent than the Wi-Fi frequency. That is obviously, if you're living in an apartment block, you have no choice. So just to give you an option, if
You'd also get products as well to not scare anyone.
just buy the product.
You can get
We'll put the
neutralizing
link at the bottom.
pyramids and pendants and all that kind of stuff as well. I know we don't have an affiliation, but what are they called? Airs Tech and Earthing Oz, Biogeometry. Those companies have all those products where it can neutralize the EMF frequencies around you.
Do you believe that we have as much potency as those?
I would argue we have more, but it takes.
So we just need to tap into that.
Yeah, it's the tapping into it is the tricky bit, because it's hard to watch a TV show on a static channel, as a metaphor, because we're trying to view life, but because everything's so chaotic and like that vibrating so quick that it's hard for us to get a clear signal.
So everyone, let's really lean into this now and get a journal today and start connecting to your dreams and write it all down, and then give Matt a call and he will help you digest it. He's excited and awaiting. They're excited and waiting to dive into your dream today. 1-300 Matt Sorensen. That's 1-300 Matt Sorensen.
Did it used to be 1-300mattsorensen.com?
Who knows? Who knows? But how you get in touch is how you get in touch. We hope you've enjoyed dreaming with us today, or coming on this little journey, and I hope you take into consideration the power that you have and the possibilities that your dreams hold.
Yeah, that could be the key.
You've been listening to The Wizard and the Priestess. Thanks for stopping by. Stay connected and be open.